we'll start here with question 7. Okay. Now remember, what do we know about fractions? Well, when we add fractions, we have to have what's called a least common denominator, right? When we multiply, we don't have to have that. When we multiply, remember, we can cross cancel in the x direction or multiply across. It's when you add or you subtract fractions, that's where you're going to have that least common denominator. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start, it looks like, with question number 7. One here, that was 1-4 we're looking at, not 1-5. So 1-4, question number 7. Now this one isn't fractions, but it's order of operations. So it's 1 minus parentheses 13 plus 21 in parentheses there. Okay, so what do we need to do first? Well, if we remember order of operations, we always have to do our parentheses first. So we're going to take the 13 and the 21, we're going to add those together. So 13 and 21, that gives you a 34. Now, what do we do with the negative? Okay, we did our parentheses. The negative is still there, so it comes down. Is my answer going to be a positive 33 or a negative 33? Let's remember how our signs work. Which one? Negative 33. Why? Okay, because I look at the two numbers. Now they are different in signs, right? Which one is larger, 1 or 34? 34 is the larger number. What's the sign of the 34, the larger number? Negative. So what do we know? My sign's going to be negative. And what's it going to be? 34 minus 1 is a 33. So it will be a negative 33 because they are different signs. We figure out the sign of the larger number, and that is the sign of your result there. And another good way of thinking about it is like a bank account. All right, you're overdrawn $34. If you add $1 to it, then that means you're only overdrawn now by $33. So if it helps, think about them as bank accounts and dollar values. Next, we're going to look at question 9. And question 9 is mixed fractions. So, what do we need to do first? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to look and get rid of our parentheses. And in some cases, these parentheses might just be extra signs. So, nothing we can do inside the parentheses, but out in front we have a positive and a negative. And a positive and a negative means that sign's going to be what? Negative. So that's the first thing we do before we do anything else is deal with the parentheses. Now, this is what's called a mixed fraction. So we are going to look at them separately. So we're going to look at the whole part by itself first. So the whole part, what do we have for our whole numbers? Okay, and the signs goes with them. So we have 13 minus 3, and 13 minus 3 is a positive 10. Is everyone okay with that so far? So that's the first thing we do, is we separate out the whole part from the fractional part here. Let me adjust that focus just a little bit here. This way it's a little bit clearer, hopefully. Okay. I think that's it's a little bit too much. Let me just adjust it so it's a little bit clearer here. I thought it was a little blurry. I think that's a little bit clearer. Okay, it looks like the brightness is about the best I can get it there. So we've got the 10. Now what about the fractions? Yep, they have the same denominator. So we don't have to worry about getting a common one, do we? Because it's already there. Now watch the sign. Sign is negative. And what do we have for our fractions? Well, it looks like we have 2 sevenths, right? And we have a minus 5 sevenths. Which one's larger, 2 or negative 5? Well, just look at the numbers. The 5 is a larger number. What's the sign of the 5? Negative. So that means my sign's going to be negative. 5 minus 2 is a 3. So that's a minus 3/7. Is everyone okay with that? I think it's still a little bit blurry. Let me see if that'll help any better. I think that might make it a little bit clearer there. It's always good to get. Yeah, that's about as best as I can get it. Okay. Right. And so let's think about what we've got. We did the whole part, right? We did the fraction part separately. Now, how do we take 10 minus 3/7? Well, we are going to have to borrow from that, right? So we need to borrow a whole fraction. So we're going to take this 10, and we're going to borrow 1 from it, so we're going to make it 9 7/7. Now, why did we borrow? We borrowed so that we could then subtract them. Because now look at the fraction parts. 7/7 and a minus 3/7, well, those have now the same denominator. And 7 minus 3 makes it a 4/7. So my final answer would then be what? 9 4/7. Do you see how I borrowed from that? Because when you get to this point and you want to subtract them, we need to take out that same denominator over itself. So in this case, my denominator was a 7, so I brought out a 7/7. We borrowed from it. I did that so I could put them together. It's just like borrowing when you divide. And when you divide, you have to borrow in some cases, or subtract, you borrow. Same concept here. So we did that, we put them together, and that's going to be our final answer. So that would be 9 4/7 as our finished answer there. So do you see how I split it up into the whole part, right? Fraction part. Now, we were lucky on this one. Why? Because these fractions already had the same denominator. If they didn't, then we would have to get a common denominator. Combine them together, put them back, and then combine it with the whole part. So that was question 9. Question 11 is another fraction question. And this one is going to require us to get a common denominator. So first, let's deal with our signs and the parentheses. So we have a set of parentheses here, nothing we can do with it. But out front, we have a positive and a negative. So that's going to make that negative. Now we have 3/4 minus 1/20. Is everyone okay with that so far? So nothing new there. Now, we want to, in this case, subtract them from each other. When we want to subtract them, we are going to need a common denominator. So we look at our denominators. Our denominators are 4 and a 20. So the least common denominator of 4 and 20 would be what? 20. Always check your larger number first. Does 20 go evenly into 4? Yes. And it's going to go in there 5 times. So now we know our least common denominator is 20. So the 3/4, what are we going to have to multiply it by to make it have a 20 down below? 5/5. Do we have to use anything on the 1/20? No, why not? Because it already has that common denominator, right? 3 times 5, that makes it 15/20 minus 1/20. And that comes out to then be 15 minus 1, that makes, or 15 minus 1, the numerator, that makes it a 14, and it is positive, but that is not our final answer. Why not? Because we always have to check with these fractions to make sure that we can't reduce. Can we reduce down 14/20? Yes, because they are both even numbers, so that means a 2 is going to go into both of them, so we can reduce this down into 7 what? 7/10 for your final answer. And sometimes on these, it's just building confidence. Like you may know how to do them, but you may just want to double check and make sure you're doing them correctly. But when we add or subtract fractions, what do we always have to have? common denominator. That's going to be our first thing that we look for. So that was 11. Let's talk now about 12. Same thing on 12. We do have to be careful with our signs. And the first thing we have to deal with is our parentheses, because that's always first. We cannot do anything inside the parentheses, but what we can do is work with the two negatives in front. And the negative is going to make that now a positive. So now we've got 1/9 plus 5/9. What's my least common denominator? It's already done. It's already a what? 9. A lot of times I see students make a mistake and they'll put 18 down below. Well, we're not adding those together. What's my common denominator? 9. So the 9 goes down below. We do not add those together. That 9 is my common denominator. So always place that down below at the very beginning. And then we add. So 1 plus 5 makes it a 6. That's not my finished answer, though, because we always have to reduce. And what does 6/9 reduce down into? 2/3. And there's your final finished answer. And I know a lot of times you get intimidated just by seeing fractions. Fractions are like any other number. They just require a little bit of extra work sometimes. But there's something that we have to work with, and we're going to get used to working with them. So you'll end up being good at fractions by the time you finish this course. 18 is another one that we asked about. Question 18 has multiple fractions. And we've got parentheses. And so we're going to have to make sure that we follow our order of operations. So let's take a moment to think about what we've got here. An order of operations. Before I even deal with this negative in front, I am going to have to work with what's inside my parentheses, because the order of operations says before any other work is done, I need to work with inside the parentheses. So we're going to do the parentheses first here. So that's going to be my first part that I work with. So work on the inside and just work your way out. So for the inside the parentheses, we have minus 1/2, minus 1/4. So we need a common denominator. And what would the least common denominator? 2 and 4 be. Very good work. That's going to be a 4. So that 1/4, it doesn't need anything. That 1/2, though, what does it need to get multiplied by? 2/2. And now when we combine these together, 2 times a negative 1, that's a negative 2. 2 times 2 down below makes it a 4. Minus 1/4. Okay, so now we've gotten to this point. Our common denominator is a 4. Right? So that's going to be written down below first. What's the sign of my answer going to be? Positive or negative here on this part? Negative, right? Why is it going to be negative? Because they're both negative, right? We're subtracting, so these go together with the negative. So 2 and 1 makes it a 3. You would add them together, so that's going to make that a minus 3/4. Why? If we think about it with money, if I'm overdrawn by $2 and I spend $1 more, now I'm actually overdrawn by what? $3, right? These go together. We're not multiplying here. When do we multiply? We multiply when we have parentheses on the outside. So that's multiplication. Right now we're adding. So now that becomes then a minus 3/4. So we'll write that down. We still have our parentheses. We have a negative here. 3/8 out in front. Now we can finish it. So our parentheses are done. Out in front of the parentheses, what do we have? Double negatives, and that's our multiplication. Negative and negative makes it a positive. So that is now going to be rewritten as 3/8. Double negative makes it positive 3/4. Now we need a least common denominator again. So what's the least common denominator of 8 and 4? 8. So one of them is already the 8 down below. What's the other one need? That 3/4. What does it need? 2/2. So let's now multiply that by the 2/2. You could put a 1/1 here, but we don't really need to. That's just an extra thing to write down, and I think more confusion. They already have the same denominators now, so you don't have to use the 8 for anything. So now we have 3/8 plus 3 times 2 makes it 6. 4 times 2 makes it an 8, right? And that's what we want. They have the same denominators. We can add them together, and that would be 9 and what? Or 9 over what? 8. And you can leave it like that, or you can write it as a mixed fraction. Normally we would just leave it as an improper fraction like that. You could write that as 1 and 1/8, right? Because 1 and 1/8, this number is larger on the numerator. So you could write it as a mixed fraction. And so you just borrow from it. You have 9. 9 minus 8 is 1. That's left over. That's my remainder. And 9 went into 8 one time. So that would be 1 and 1/8. And you can also just leave it as 9/8. Same thing. Both of them are acceptable. If it uses mixed fractions, though, you'll probably want to write your answers in mixed fraction. Is it making a little bit more sense with the fractions now? You just have to take your time with them, break them into parts, and don't be intimidated by them. Now, last time I did the harder question, I did 19, and we talked a little bit about question 20. We're going to go ahead now and set up and finish out question 20. Just so we can make sure that we understand these positive and negative numbers. Nikki is fishing from a bank 10 feet above the water. In this location, the fish tend to feed 31 feet below the surface. How long must Nikki's fishing line be to reach the fish? So let's think about what we've got. And you can draw a diagram if you need to. So here's the water here. And we're going to be fishing 10 feet above that. So the water's going to be at 0. So there's our 0 starting point. And this is going to be 10 feet above. And here's Nikki. And she's going to be trying to catch the fish. And these fish are way down here. And they're 10 feet below. So bad diagram, I know, but it's okay. So there's your fish. 10 feet above is her. Here's the water. And this is minus 31 down below. Now, I want to know how much rope, or in this case, how much fishing line I need so that I can catch this fish. Well, how would we handle this? We want to put these together, right? So we need to know how much we need. So how many feet do we need to reach the water? 10 feet. And how many feet below is it? 31, right? It's a negative, so it's below it. So I wonder how much I'm going to have actually have. So I've got 10 feet from the top. I'm going to then subtract from that because it's negative. That minus 31. And that double negative here is going to make that now a positive. And now we've got 10 plus 31, which is now 41. And so we are going to need 41 feet of line to be able to catch that fish. Right? I have subtracted off because it was negative. Because you're subtracting the two, you want the difference between here to there. So we're going to be subtracting them. And that double negative, that makes that then a positive. We put those together, and we know now that we need 41 feet. Sometimes it might be easier to draw a diagram so you can see it. If you look at it now with this picture, you can clearly see she has 10 feet here. She needs another 31 feet to get to the fish. So that means I'm going to end up needing a total of 41 feet. But you can either do it mathematically with the double negative, or just look at the picture and try to see how does it all relate and use intuition and common sense. So common sense would tell me that that's going to be 41 feet. Mathematically, that's why, because you're subtracting, because you want to find the difference between them. Is that going to take care of the questions now out of 1-4? Anything else out of 1-4 to look at? I think 1-5 may have been a little bit more difficult. So now we're going to look at 1-5. And we need to make sure that we understand the difference between multiplying and adding and subtracting. Sometimes I see students make a mistake. We are not subtracting these fractions or adding them together. Why not? We are multiplying them because of the parentheses. So this parentheses right here, this tells me that we are multiplying those fractions. If there's no parentheses, see if it was written like this, just for example, this would be a different question, wouldn't it, right? This would be add or subtract. And that is way different than this, because this, with the parentheses, is multiply, right? So this is going to be multiply. So we are not adding or subtracting, we are multiplying. And I'll cross this out just so you don't make a mistake and get confused with that part. But that was just explaining that that would be different than that. Now, when we multiply, do we have to have a common denominator? No, we do not. When do we have to have common denominators? Adding or subtracting. So this is multiplication. Now, when we multiply, what can we do? We can cross cancel. We cannot do this with addition or subtraction. But we can do cross canceling with our multiplication. So let's go ahead and cross cancel. 7 and 35. Those both have a 5 in common, or 7 in common, don't they? Right, so that's going to cancel, and that's going to cancel, and that's going to leave you now with a -1 and a 5 down below. Is everyone okay with that? Because 7 and 35, they have a 7 in common. What about on the other diagonal? 6 and 4, well, those again have a 2 in common, so that's going to be, when we divide out a 2, a -3 and a 2. Is everyone okay with that so far? Now we multiply. Then we'll see what we're left with and go from there. Now, what about a negative times a negative? Negative times a negative makes it a positive, so that would be a +3 when I multiply across. And 2 times 5 makes it a 10. So my final answer would be a 3/10. I cannot go any further because 3/10 will not reduce down. Is everyone okay with how I did that, right? Why could I cross cancel? Because we were multiplying, not adding, subtracting. If it was like this, I couldn't have done that. That would have been a completely different question, completely different problem. So watch for those parentheses. If it's got parentheses, that means we're multiplying. So question 4 is the next one we're looking at.
Would another way to solve that problem, could you also flip the second fraction?
Okay, we would flip this over if it was division. So you would flip the second fraction over if it was division. So if this was division, then that would flip over. Okay, but we're not dividing here, we are multiplying, right? So when we divide, we flip the fraction over. And we'll look at some of those here later on. Because I think question 7 is one we're going to have to flip it over. Because that's division. This one's multiplication. So when you divide, you flip the second fraction over, and then you cancel. But this one was multiplication. So question 4 is next. And question 4 says, what is the average of all the even integers between minus 10 and positive 12, inclusive of both? So we are going to find the average. And we want all the even integers. So let's look at our numbers. We're going to start with negative 10. And we're going to go all the way to 12. So we want our even numbers. So that's going to be negative 10, right? Negative 8, negative 6, negative 4, negative 2. 0 is still in there because 0 is actually an even number. Then we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and what? 12. So I listed them all out. Now, the easiest way, I think, to work with this is when I listed them all out, I can cancel certain ones out. So let's see what we can cancel out. I can cancel this 10 and the negative 10. 8 and the negative 8. Those are the opposites. They cancel. 6 and negative 6. 4 and negative 4. 2 and negative 2. 0 doesn't really matter at all. So what number didn't I cancel out? 12. Now, how many numbers total do I have? Let's count the number of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so that's going to be our average. How do we find our average again? We add up all the numbers and divide by how many we have. And when we add them, the positive and the negatives cancel. So I wrote them all out, listed them all out, and they canceled each other. The only one that didn't have something to cancel with was 12. So that's there. There was 12 numbers total when I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and 12 divided by 12 is a 1. So what's my average going to come out to be? 1. Make sure you put that 0 in there as you count down. You just see they're even numbers. So we start with our negative and just work our way up to our positive. We combine them together, and the way I do it I think is the easiest is just cancel as we go along. Count the number of numbers and divide them out. Question 5. Question 5, we're going to be plugging values into this equation, into this expression. And they give you the values to use. So we're going to use a negative 2 for x. We're going to use a positive 3 and a negative 4 for the value of a here. So this is what we've got. This is an expression. Why is it in an expression? Because we have no equal sign. If we had an equal sign, it would be an equation. And what we're going to try and do is we are going to try and plug our values in, and we're going to try and break it up. So we plug our values in. Now, when we plug in a negative, we want to use parentheses. If we need to, that way we don't get confused with the signs if there's already a negative there. If there's not, then we can just write it down. So we're going to plug in our x. So that's going to be an 8 minus 2. You could use a positive and a negative, but I usually don't do that unless we already have a negative there. We'll do the same thing with the y. And so that's 9 plus 3. Now, what about the a? So for the a, we have a minus 2, right? This minus is going to come down. I want to use parentheses around that 4 because it's already negative, and there's a negative that comes down. Is everyone okay with that? So the negative came down. I put parentheses with the negative 4 because I need to watch my signs. And the double negative here is going to make that now a positive. You can do that first. We're now going to work from left to right. We're going to go through and add up and combine our pieces together inside the parentheses. And then we'll multiply at the end. So 8 minus 2 is 6. 9 plus 3 is 12. Minus 2 plus 4. Minus 2 plus 4. Is that a positive 2 or a negative 2? Okay, positive 2. Why? Because the 4 was positive and it's the larger number. We're subtracting them so they go together. Now, once we've done our parentheses, what are we doing with all of these? We've got our parentheses out in front, right? So that means we're going to multiply. So now we just multiply across. So we've got 6 times 12 times 2. I believe that should be 144 because that's 12 squared. So 6 times 2 is 12 times 12 again. That does make it now a 144. So is everyone okay with how I plug the numbers in? Right, watch out for those double negatives. When you plug in a negative, if it's already negative like this one with the A, you bring down your negative and put parentheses around the 4 so you don't mix up the double negative. That was question 5. And if you need me to explain any more of these, let me know. I can go through them in more detail. Question 6 is next. And question 6 says find the average. So we have 9, and let me write these down. 9, 14, 6, 7, 15, 2, 18, and 1. So we want to find our average. Now, when we find our average, what do? Well, we add up all the numbers, right? And then we divide by how many numbers are listed or given. These are all positive, so that's going to be really nice for us. So we can just add these numbers right across. So let's just add up these numbers. We've got 9, 14, 6, 7, 15, 2, 18, and 1. That gives me a 72. And how many numbers do I have? Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we've got our 72 divided by 8, and that should be a 9, isn't it? And that gives me my average now to be positive 9. So that's how you do an average. You add them all up, and you divide by how many numbers are listed. Question 7. We are dividing. Okay, and we talked about this and mentioned it a little bit earlier. Someone asked about, well, when do we flip the fractions over? We flip the second fraction over when we divide. So we are dividing in this case. Now, we cannot cancel the 6 and the 9 because that is division. So we have to turn it first into multiplication. So we're going to go ahead and turn this into multiplication. And when we turn this into multiplication, the first fraction stays the same. The second fraction is going to get flipped over. So I'm going to flip over that negative 13 over 6 there. And I'm going to flip that over now. Because why do we do that? Because it's division. So we need to turn that into multiplication. So we flip the second fraction over. First fraction does not change. So the first fraction stays the same. Now can we cancel anything out? Nope. 5 and 6, nothing in common. 13 and 9, nothing in common. So if nothing's in common, we multiply across. Negative times a negative here is going to make that a positive. And what's 5 times that 13? We multiply across. 5 times that 13, well, that's a 65. And 9 times that 6, that makes it a 54. Nothing we can do, so we're going to leave that as a 65 over 54. So the first thing we did was we flipped it over, and then we just multiplied. Oh, sorry about that. That should have been 65, isn't it? Because 5 times 13, probably just said the wrong one. Yep, it's 65. So that's going to be 65 over 54. Nothing reduces down, so we leave it as it is. Is everyone okay with that? So flip it over, and then just multiply. Question 9. Question 9, we have several parts working at the same time. There's quite a bit of stuff going on in this one. So let's go ahead and do the numerator, or the top half first, separate from the denominator. So let's look at our numerator, the top half. And what do we have in our numerator? Whenever we have a complicated fraction like this one, you can split it up. So in our numerator, we have minus 2 times 4, and minus 2 times 4, well, that makes it a negative 8. So there's the top half. Numerator's the top half, so we did that. What about the denominator? So let's see what we've got in our denominator. In our denominator, we have 2, a minus 6. So look at what we've got now. The double negative now is going to make this now a what? Positive. And so we now have 2 plus 6, and 2 plus 6 is a 8. Rewriting that, we now have negative 8 over positive 8. So 8 over 8 is a 1. But what about the negative? Negative over positive is a negative. Count the number of negative signs. If you have a single negative, it stays negative. If you have 2 negatives, that would make that positive. So we have one of them. So that negative on the top, positive on the denominator, down below, makes it a negative. I do what now? No, why not? Right, and why are we not multiplying here? Because we've got this extra sign here. We're multiplying when we take the negative and the negative. That's your multiplication. So the negative and the negative, see, that makes that now a positive. And that gets rid of the parentheses, and now we have addition.
But why would it be subtraction if there was parentheses?
Okay. What we've got is this. We do our parentheses first. So, nothing's inside. When we cancel our signs, that's our multiplication. The negative times the negative, that makes it a positive, right? And so that came down as a positive there. That got rid of our parentheses. Why? Because we multiplied. Now the parentheses are gone, right? Once the parentheses are gone, what is this? This is not multiplication, is it? This is adding. So 2 and 6 makes it 8. So when we multiplied here, we got rid of our parentheses. When you canceled those negatives out, the double negative, that got rid of your parentheses. And if we don't have parentheses, it's not multiplication anymore. It is what? Addition or subtraction. Does that kind of clear that up, though? So whenever you do the double negative, that's going to get rid of your parentheses. And once the parentheses are gone, then it's either addition or subtraction.
Okay. Your negative 8 is your numerator always the negative number? Or could your denominator be the negative?
Yeah. If it would have been negative down here, let's say it would have been a -8 below and a positive on the top, then it would be a positive over negative and make it a negative. So either one can be positive or negative. So in this case, the top half came out to be negative. Right? The bottom half came out to be positive. And then what we do to simplify our signs down is we look. There's a negative here. There's no sign, so this is assumed to be positive. And a negative divided by a positive is a negative. Sure, we can go back and look at 8. Now, why is 8 going to be undefined? Okay, and the numerator. Okay, so let's look at 8. 7 minus 7. Okay, 7 minus 7 is a 0. 7 minus 7 down below is also what? 0. Anytime, it doesn't matter what the numerator is at all, anytime you have a 0 below, irregardless of what the numerator is, this is not 0, this is undefined. Because you cannot divide any number by what? 0, no matter what. It doesn't matter whether it's 8, -12, a 0, it doesn't matter. If you have a 0 in the denominator, your answer is undefined. Even if 0's in the numerator, it's still undefined. So that was 8. Now we're going to look at 14. We've got a few more. And then once we work these out, we'll take a short break. So let's look now at question 14. And question 14, it says in the directions, write a numerical expression for the phrase and then simplify. Are we going to have an equal sign? No. Why not? Because it says this is a what? Expression. So no equal sign. So let's see what we've got and how we would write this. We're going to read it and then we're going to look at it piece for piece. 2/9 of, and in some cases of means multiplied. So 2/9 of the difference between -6 and -24. So we're looking at the difference between those two numbers. So let's see what we've got first. First thing we have is we've got 2/9. Okay? Now that of can mean multiplied. And we're going to use parentheses because we're multiplying. And what are we looking at the multiplication of? The difference between. That means we're going to be what? Be subtracting. Difference between -6 and -24. So -6 minus a -24. Why do we have the double negative? Because the 24 is negative, but where did this one come from? That came from the difference, right? So that's why we have the double negative there. Why do we put parentheses around the 2/9 out in front, like this? Because that was the multiplication. So we want 2/9, which goes out in front, of, in this case, that of means multiplied. And we're going to multiply that by, we use parentheses, the difference between. So that means subtract, -6 and a -24. So -6, difference there means another negative. The 24 is already negative. So now what do we know? We know the double negative is going to make this now a what? Positive. And -6 plus 24. That goes first. Well, -6 plus 24. Is that going to be a positive or a negative number? Positive. And 24 minus 6 makes it a 18. And then we've got our 2/9 out in front. Is everyone okay with that? So we do our parentheses first. Now, how do we handle 2/9 times that 18? Yep, we can put that over 1 if you want to, just like that. Okay, if you need to, you can do that. So I'm going to put that over 1. And now we can see that we can cancel. So the 18 and the 9, those can cancel. 18 and 9, that leaves you with a 2 and a 1. 2 times 2 makes it a 4 in the numerator. 1 times 1 is 1. And 4 divided by 1 is a what? 4. You could have also done this. You could have said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and multiply this across. So 2 times 18 is 36. And 36 over 9 is still the same, 4. So if you didn't cross cancel here, you could have just multiplied and divided at the end. You'd get the same answer. It doesn't matter if you cross cancel or if you just multiply straight across. You're going to end up with the same result. Normally, though, we cross cancel because it's easier to reduce now than to reduce at the end. So that's normally what we do, is we cross cancel early. But if you don't see something, that's fine, because you can just reduce it down at the end. So that was question 14. We've got a couple more, and then we'll take a short break. So just 3 more. We'll take a break, come back, and look at the next couple of sections. Looks like 18 is next. So question 18 says, what is the average of all the integers between minus 15 and positive 9 inclusive? So let's write out all of our numbers. Now, these are not even or odd. They're just all the numbers. I think the easiest way is to just write them down so we can see what can cancel. So I'm going to write them all down here. And then I'll put the pauses over here as well. So we've got all of our negatives written out. We're going to go all the way to 9. And why I did it is just to make it easier. Because what can I do with these numbers? Now, a lot of these can cancel. So 1 and negative 1's gone. 0 doesn't matter, that's gone too. So 2 and negative 2 cancel. 3, negative 3. 4, negative 4. 5, negative 5. 6, negative 6. 7 cancels. 8's cancel. And the 9's cancel. So what's left over? Only thing that didn't get canceled, all of those, right? So now we're going to go ahead and sum, because that's what's left over. All those numbers. Now, what do you notice about these? We're adding these together. So these are all negative. So my answer is going to be negative. So how do I put them together? I just add them, right? Because they're all the same sign. They're all negative, so let's put them together. So we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So that piece comes out to be a negative 75. Is everyone okay with what I did? So cancel them out. I write them out this way. I think it's easiest. Now, how many numbers do I have for my average? So let's go ahead and be careful and count here. So the numerator came out to be a negative 75. And how many numbers do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, right? And negative 75 over 25. A negative divided by a positive makes it a negative. And that's going to come out to be a negative what? 3. And that is my answer. I'm having you write them out just so you count them correctly, because a lot of times students will forget the 0. The 0 is in there. Write them out, count them up. Those negatives and positives, they remove themselves. It does take a little bit of time, but it's the easiest way to do these. 19 is the next one. Twice the product of -2 and -3 subtracted from 7. So, twice the product, that means we've got a 2. Product means multiply. So, twice the product of -2 and -3 subtracted from 7. So let's think about what we've got here. This is going to be an expression. We're looking at twice the product, so we have to multiply. We've got an and here. So we want twice the product, so that means we've got a 2. And what are we going to be multiplying it by? We are going to be multiplying it by -2 and -3 subtracted from 7. Okay, the and in this case means we're going to be adding here. So we have twice the product. That means that 2 goes there. And what are we looking at the product of? Okay, -2 and -3 subtracted from 7. So let's make sure we have it all written out correctly. Twice the product means we got the 2. The and in this case, careful with how we read it. And in this case means multiplied. So we've got 2. We've got a -2. And we've got a -3, so we're going to multiply, right? Twice the product means multiply, of -2 and -3. Now, what are we going to do with that? Okay, watch your order here. Subtracted from. When I say subtracted from 7, that means it's taken away, so the 7 is going to go out in front with the negative behind it, right? Why? Because it's subtracted. Okay, let's talk about this again so we can see how the pieces all go together. Twice the product of -2 and -3. Is everyone okay with how I got this part? Right, twice the product of -2 and -3. That's that. Now, what are we going to then do with that? We are going to take that away, subtract that from 7. So when we take it away from the 7, that means the 7 goes out in front, and this is subtracted off. That's why the 7 went out in front, because of this subtraction, because it says subtracted off of that. Now we can work with it, and we're going to deal with our signs. So let's do our multiplication here first. Let's look at what I've got here. 2 times -2 times -3. Well, a negative and a negative makes it a positive. We've got 2 times 2, which is 4, times 3 makes it a 12, and what's still out in front of it? So bring that down. So we did all of that, and the negative came down. Now we subtract them, and 7 minus 12. Positive or negative number? Negative, and so one's positive, one's negative, so we subtract them. 12 minus 7 is a 5, so that means my answer is going to be a -5. The setup on that one I know is a little bit confusing. When we subtract something off, it means it's taken away at the end. Right? So we're going to subtract that from 7. So that means the 7 goes out in front, and this part's being taken away.
I did it a different way, but I'm the same.
Yep. Yep, and that's fine. As long as you get the same answer, as long as you still have that -5, you'd probably just set it up a little bit differently, but it came out to be the same result. Question 20. The product of 4/5 and -2/7 divided by 2/5. So we're going to be multiplying, and we're going to be dividing. So what do we have? We have 4/5 times negative 2/7. And then we're going to divide that by 2/5. Is everyone okay with what we've got there? Let's go ahead and work with our numerator first, and then we'll deal with the division. We're multiplying, so nothing cancels. So we're going to multiply across. 4 times negative 2, well, that's a negative 8. 5 times 7, that's a 35, and that's over 2/5. Is everyone okay with that so far? Right? We just multiplied these together, and we got to there. Now, what do we have? Fraction divided by another fraction, right? This is division. And what do we do with division? We have to turn it into multiplication. How does that work? We take our second fraction, or the one below, and we flip it over. So when I flip that over, that now becomes a 5/2. And now we should know how to finish this, because now we can cancel. So 5 and 35, those cancel. That leaves you with a 1 and a 7. Negative 8 and positive 2, that leaves you with a -4 and a positive 1. Multiplying, we have -4 times 1. Well, that's a -4. 7 times 1, that's a 7. So what's that going to end up being? Negative 4/7. So that's the last question that we asked about. We'll take a short break, then we'll come back, and we'll start the next section, which is 1/6. No. Why are we not finding least common denominators at all? We have no addition, right? This is all multiplication. Why? Again, because of the parentheses. If this would have been with no parentheses, right, that would be subtraction. If this would have been this, see the difference? This would require a common denominator. This one does not, right? So this is not even that. But if you didn't have the parentheses, that would be subtracted from, and then that would be completely different. Does it make sense about the parentheses, though? So that's the way you remember. If you got parentheses, you are multiplying. So let's take a short break. We'll come back, and we'll start the next section. So let's meet back here in about 10 minutes. So let's meet back about 9:10.